Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me for this session on AI in the PR classroom, a faculty survival guide. I'm Lisa Dubois-Lowe, an associate professor of practice and a TLPDC fellow for AY 2025. My goal today is to provide you with a foundational understanding of generative AI, its risks and benefits, and how we, as public relations and strategic communication practitioners and faculty, understand how we can not only survive, but learn to thrive and adapt our teaching strategies in response to its growing presence in our respective fields. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. But before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. I am not a computer scientist, engineer, or professional ethicist. My insights today are based on hands-on experience, research, and conversations with subject matter experts. Sources cited in line or in the footnotes. For details, email me at lisa.lowe@ttu.edu. Images are Microsoft Office stock unless otherwise noted. Students are using generative AI. Some are using it well, some are misusing it, and some are just confused. The real question isn't how do we stop it, but how do we adapt our teaching to prepare them for an AI-powered world? Regardless of our individual stances on all things AI, we should acknowledge that it is already here and will impact life as we know it. It's time to embrace the challenge and set the tone as leaders, educators, and mentors in our respective fields. By the end of this session, you should be able to define key terms related to AI, including generative AI, large language models, and machine learning. Identify the benefits and risks of using generative AI in higher education settings. Explain how generative AI tools work. Evaluate how course policies and assessments may need to adapt to ensure academic integrity in the age of AI. And finally, apply strategies for designing AI-resistant assignments and assessments that emphasize critical thinking, reflection, and personalization. Welcome to the revolution. Before we dive in, let's start with the guiding principles that shape how I approach generative AI in teaching, learning, and professional practice. I believe every single user should understand how these models work or don't work. These models are trained on vast amounts of data, which makes them both powerful but unpredictable. We must protect intellectual property and personally identifiable information and be mindful of what we and our students input into AI platforms. Private or proprietary information should never be shared. Instead of focusing on AI as a tool for cheating, I believe we should consider how to prepare students for a world where AI is already shaping their futures. Although technology experts long predicted a future in which Gen AI existed, the rest of us weren't exactly prepared for the earned media storm that ushered in ChatGPT in early 2023. As generative AI evolves, so should our approach. We don't have all the answers. I don't think we ever will. But we can start by engaging in informed experimentation to build the plane as we fly it. Currently, there are many generative AI tools available, but based on my experience, I recommend ChatGPT by OpenAI and Claude by Anthropic. Both are the premium versions, and also Microsoft Copilot for both teaching and professional use. However, these recommendations are always subject to change as the AI landscape evolves. Further, views expressed here do not reflect the official stance of the department, the college, or an endorsement of Texas Tech University. If you know me in real life, you know memes are my sixth love language. And I use this one frequently with regards to wicked problems like generative AI. If generative AI was a math problem, if you're going down a river at 2 miles an hour and your canoe loses a wheel, how much pancake mix would you need to reshingle your roof? So let's begin with some basics. This workshop focuses specifically on generative AI, sometimes referred to Gen AI, or simply AI in this presentation. But it's important to remember that there are many types of AI, including Internet AI that leverages user data from the Internet to enhance and personalize user experiences. That could be product recommendations, YouTube suggestions, search results, etc. There's business AI that applies algorithms to data in traditional industries to optimize and make better decisions. That includes intelligence, financial, big data, processes, and forecasting. Perception AI that can understand and interact with the world by recognizing, hearing, or otherwise perceiving inputs from the environment. That includes voice and facial recognition, chatbots, and generative AI. And then there's autonomous AI that can make decisions and carry out tasks in the physical world autonomously, like self-driving cars or drones, vehicles, manufacturing robots, or care robots. Further, it's important to understand the AI ecosystem. I love this easy to understand reference published by Andreas Horn, who is head of Artificial Intelligence Ops at IBM. First, we start with AI, the broadest category covering automation, reasoning, and decision making. Then, machine learning, AI that learns patterns from data without explicit programming. Then we get to neural networks, a subset of machine learning inspired by the human brain, designed for pattern recognition and feature extraction. Deep learning refers to multi-layered neural networks that drive a lot of modern AI advancements, for example, enabling image recognition, speech processing, and more. Transformers are a revolutionary deep learning architecture introduced by Google in 2017 that allows models to understand and generate language efficiently. Generative AI is AI that doesn't just analyze data, it creates it. From text and images to music and code, this layer powers today's most advanced AI models. Generative pre-trained transformers, literally the GPT and ChatGPT, is a specific subset of generative AI that uses transformers for text and graphic generation. Then we get to large language models, LLMs, which are massive AI models trained on extensive data sets to understand and generate human-like language. Now here is an extremely reductive overview of how a generative AI large language model platform works. As we stated, AI is trained on massive amounts of text from books, websites, code, etc. The data is broken into tokens, which are small pieces of language the model learns patterns from. When you enter a prompt, the question, task, or instruction you give the generative AI, your prompt then travels from your computer or your smartphone to a data center where the AI model runs on massive processors. The model predicts the most likely next words and returns an answer based on patterns it learned during training and returns it to you in less time than I can explain how it works. Like any technology, generative AI comes with both risks and benefits. Let's break them down. Google Cloud surveyed more than 2,500 business and technology leaders in 2024 to discover where and how they are seeing the biggest returns. One thing was clear: those who aren't deploying generative AI today risk falling behind tomorrow. And as a consumer of industry reports, I can tell you that this is the consistent messaging leaders in all sectors are receiving. Generative AI is a necessary component of any strategy, and this has both short and long-term implications for both us and for our students. Let's look at the risks. Ubiquity. AI tools are everywhere, all at once, making it difficult to regulate usage. Cost and longevity. The platform you use today might become prohibitively expensive or disappear in a few months as the market becomes increasingly competitive. You'll see a consolidation of platforms as only the strongest and best capitalized will survive. AI agents, or AIA for short. These are AI-generated responses and bots that can replace or enhance search engine results, sometimes leading to both dis- and misinformation. On the flip side, the benefits include ubiquity. AI tools are everywhere, user-friendly, and intuitive. You can start today for free. Efficacy, efficiency, and creativity. Generative AI can assist with brainstorming, summarizing, and automating repetitive tasks. Creativity. AI can generate content ideas, refine messaging, and enhance engagement. Can provide on-demand support. It can act as a virtual assistant, supporting instructors, researchers, and students, allowing us to get ahead of our skis, if you will. Let's look at large language models broadly. As we said, they're trained on vast amounts of data, but that data is likely someone else's intellectual property, or it contains bias. OpenAI and other models break all internet protocols when it comes to scraping the web and consuming data, a battle that is playing out in intellectual property lawsuits right now, further exacerbated by naive users who unwittingly upload their own IP or resources that are subject to copyright, which then become part of the large language model. Or they upload unredacted materials with personally identifiable information like addresses and phone numbers on resumes or student IDs from assessment information. Don't do it, I say. In addition to the likelihood of bias, these models can create and spread both mis- and disinformation at an unprecedented pace. I believe it's dangerous to anthropomorphize this technology, but you'll frequently see output errors described as hallucinations, which are really just errors in the algorithms. Utilizing Gen AI to produce outputs you don't have the expertise to accept or reject as true is an issue. Although some models or modes can now access the web, in many instances, generative AI doesn't search the internet in real time. Instead, it uses what it learned during training to predict what comes next. That's why it can produce convincing but inaccurate answers. It just doesn't, quote, know truth, just patterns. And as I've already said, these platforms are intuitive, ubiquitous, cheap and/or free. However, just like in the early days of social media, monetization issues are unclear. None of the leading models are currently realizing projected profits, which makes it more important than ever to be cautious of over-reliance on any particular platform. Lastly, we can't overlook the adverse environmental impact data centers pose. Although these observations actually came from the 2024 South by Southwest AI track, I think they're still appropriate today. So predictions include by 2050, 100 years of progress will have occurred. Powered by AI is losing ground as a value proposition now. In a few years, AI will be digital. In other words, it will be assumed. AI makes us more human. Systems for work are broken. Productivity measures haven't substantively changed since the Industrial Revolution. And bottom line, the call was to focus on the problem, not the technology. So now that we've got the big picture of generative AI, Let's take a moment to gather our thoughts. In my opinion, metacognition is important when it comes to generative AI. Otherwise, it's easy to lose focus, sometimes easy to lose heart. Why not pause this for a second and consider what problem or problems generative AI poses from your point of view? Come on back when you're done. Maybe your answers included job loss for faculty and entry-level PR and strategic communication positions, loss of control over what happens in our own classrooms, misinformation, disinformation, cheating, fearing that students will be even less prepared for the real world when they leave our classrooms. You might have answered all of these and more. My professional philosophy on generative AI is this. My years of experience as both an educator and a practitioner can't yet be replaced by generative AI output, which simply mimics human thought and creativity. But if I don't want generative AI to replace me, then I shouldn't prompt it to do my job. Meaning, I can use it to enhance my productivity, enhance my creativity in the classroom, enhance the materials that I deliver to a client. But if I'm asking it to assess student work or completely do any kind of client brief or deliverable, then I am asking for trouble. So what now? In a way, this technology is forcing us and collectively, education, K through 12, higher education, all aspects of education, to ask ourselves, what does it mean to teach? And what does it mean to learn in this new world? Sadly, I can't answer that for you, but I can give you some practical tips and tools. Policy is a good place to start. Bottom line, you must have a course policy in order to substantiate academic integrity cases. If you've not yet created a policy, the Teaching, Learning, and Professional Development Center has a variety of places to start. Just Google TLPDC AI syllabus statements. If policy was all it took, well, I could just stop here. Take a broader look at other course policies as well. Over the 2024 summer break, I took a hard look at my late submissions policy, for example. Although I feel my responsibility as a professor of practice is to reinforce industry standards, is it really conducive to learning if I don't allow students to submit late work? I revamped and gave students several ways to get help if they felt last-minute pressure to take shortcuts. I'll let you know how that little experiment works out. But consider other course policies. Are they encouraging students to cheat, quote unquote, or to take shortcuts? Once you've chosen an appropriate syllabus statement or policy, what's next? A lot will depend on your adoption, sentiment, and trust of generative AI. If you're just testing the waters, transparency will always work. Consider sharing ways you use it personally and professionally. For example, students know I love to cook and bake, and I model how I evaluate a new tool as an expert. I use the tool to create a recipe that I can either confirm is accurate or inaccurate, modeling basic AI literacy for them. Additionally, consider assessment design. Are current assignments making it too easy to use generative AI and/or cheat? Or do we need to create new ways of assessing students in a way that AI cannot easily replace? A common question I hear is, can't we detect AI-generated work? The short answer is not reliably. Neither technology or human solutions are as reliable as we think. I know many of you don't want to hear this. Although AI detection software exists, it is imperfect. For now, the bottom line is that AI detectors can only predict pretty unreliably whether a piece is AI generated. And these predictions are not reliable enough to support decision making in suspected cases of academic dishonesty. Evidence of bias against non-English speaking students exists as well. If you haven't already, be sure to download the checklist for suspected use of generative AI in student work. It gives you tips from start to finish. But your most powerful tool is a conversation. Don't take it personally. Be kind, give the students the benefit of the doubt. But here's some things that you could start with. Ask the student to meet with you to discuss the assignment without mentioning generative AI. You can begin the discussion politely, asking how they are, how they're doing in the class, and then just asking some questions like, number one, what was their interpretation of the assignment? What was their process? What resources did they use? How many drafts did they create prior to the final submission? Could they provide those previous drafts if you asked for them? And then finally, did they use generative AI tools? And if so, what percentage of the final product is represented in the final assignment? 9 times out of 10, students will be honest in my experience, but let me assure you, there are subreddits and other online resources completely dedicated to beating academic integrity cases. Sometimes we just have to document and let it go. But be sure to talk to your department chair early. Now let's talk about generative AI and assessments. Leon Fursa is a voice I trust in the generative AI teaching and learning space. He contributed to the creation of what they call the AI assessment scale that can be used to guide both assessment creation and AI policy in your courses. I know this slide is difficult to read and I'm not going to read it to you, but you can use the QR code to see the full scale or simply search for the AI assessment scale by Perkins et al. Now this scale looks familiar. It's kind of based on a Bloom's taxonomy, if you will, and it goes from number 1, using no AI at all, and all the way down to 5, which is they should use and sometimes are required to use AI creatively to solve the task, potentially co-designing new approaches with their instructor. And I have met with faculty all over the university that have used a variety of approaches in this regard. This is a great place to start. Fursa argues that all assessments are vulnerable to AI, every single one. And I agree. Potential solution for us all is to go back to basics. And one of the ways that we can do that is called backward course design, which is definitely not a new concept. You consider your course learning outcomes, and then how does your course design support those learning outcomes? How do assessments need to change given the presence of AI? That goes to assessment validity, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. And what do you want your students to know and be able to do by the end of your course? Indiana University at Bloomington has a very easy to follow flowchart, but honestly, having used this method myself, backward design is labor and time intensive. Generative AI can make short, efficient work of many aspects of backward design. In this instance, I focused on assessment validity. Here is the prompt I used. I need help with backward design for an undergraduate course on principles of public relations. The course learning outcomes and assessments are in the syllabus. Can you help me consider validity of assessment and make suggestions on tests and exams that discourage student use of generative AI to answer questions? And following my own advice, before I uploaded my syllabus, I considered intellectual property. For this instance, all of my syllabi are required by state law to be posted on the internet. Claude made recommendations on all of my assessments for PRSC 2310, including this one to adjust my reading quizzes. Add case-based scenario questions requiring application of concepts. Include questions about current PR events and campaigns happening that week. Require personal examples and/or experiences that AI couldn't fabricate. And use explain why follow-ups to multiple choice questions. In this instance, though, my reading quizzes are formative, based solely on assigned chapters of the textbook, and I give students unlimited attempts because my class is flipped. Students are required to read the chapter and take the associated quiz before lecture. Ultimately, this prepares them for summative assessments in which they are required to answer case-based questions. So, generative AI is not a replacement for human backward design, but it can complement it. Why don't you try out your own prompt and see how it works? I personally create module learning objectives for each component of my course, whether they are broken out by week or longer periods of time. Module learning objectives, or MLOs, support backward course design. By linking MLOs to course learning outcomes, instructors can design courses starting with desired outcomes and work backward to create aligned assessments and instructional materials. MLOs provide clear learning goals, which help students understand what they are expected to learn and achieve by the end of the module. They align content and assessments, ensuring that lectures, readings, activities, and assessments directly support learning outcomes. I don't know about you, but I can get caught on a tangent, and before I know it, I'm heading in an entirely different direction than my course learning outcome would dictate. They can enhance student motivation and self-efficacy. These give students a roadmap for their learning journey, making the content more meaningful and structured. This can also combat the perception of busy work. You illustrate how each component connects to the outcomes. I like hearing comments from my student like, I always feel like I'm learning in your courses, or I didn't think I would do well on this project, and now I know I can. Bottom line, MLOs improve assessment validity and help in creating assessments that truly measure learning rather than just recall or rote memorization. So here are some things to consider with regards to assessment validity that I use in my own courses. AI-resistant and higher-order thinking. Assessments that require critical thinking, application, and analysis make it hard for students to rely solely on generative AI for answers. Case-based and real-world applications can help to create assessments that measure students' ability to apply concepts rather than just recall information. I develop assessments that require personal reflection, original thought, and sometimes justification of responses to differentiate human work from AI-generated content. I require students to clearly cite sources and have a firm policy against uncredited AI use, ensuring assessments measure genuine student learning. I leverage learning management system rubrics for objective grading, and I provide qualitative feedback through structured responses, helping students understand their strengths and areas for improvement. And then finally, I am dedicated to continuous improvement from a teaching standpoint. I analyze student performance patterns to refine my assessment design and attempt to ensure that they remain both rigorous and fair, but also relevant as AI and industry trends continue to evolve. Creating, reinforcing, and revising your course policies as necessary, I believe, is one of the most powerful things you can do to combat misuse of generative AI in your classroom. I utilize 3 primary methods to reinforce everything from curriculum choices to my course policies on generative AI. Beginning with Bloom's taxonomy. Although there are other taxonomies like Fink's, I've been using Bloom's for years. Bloom's is widely used because it provides a clear progression from basic to higher order thinking, making it a great tool for instructional design and assessment development. And it reinforces why I'm asking students to learn material before they can apply it. For example, in my Principles of PR class, we spend a great deal of time on remembering and understanding before they can apply what they've learned by analyzing historical and contemporary PR case studies. And I set expectations from day one. I despise busy work, both for myself and my students. And I clearly help students understand why and how what I'm asking them to do will benefit them in future coursework, internships, employment screenings, entry-level jobs, you name it. And guest speakers are a very powerful method of using external resources to reinforcing what you're doing in the classroom. Even industry articles present useful information and various viewpoints in terms of adoption, use, and trust of generative AI, and can be very helpful, again, in helping students understand your stance and your approach to generative AI in the classroom. And one thing I do that I believe is effective is I repeatedly remind students of how and when they can use generative AI, as you can see from this Blackboard screenshot. I generally copy and paste this. By submitting the assignment to Blackboard, you are confirming that you did not use generative AI, such as ChatGPT, to create any aspect of the assignment and understand the consequences. You are allowed to use generative AI to improve grammar, spelling, punctuation, and writing clarity only. Speaking of external reinforcements, I'm going to throw in Edelman's Trust Barometer as a potential resource if you're not using it already. They just released their 25th Trust Barometer and specifically addressed artificial intelligence. And as you can see from this slide, trust in companies with technology subsectors, AI companies are less trusted than app and semiconductor developers. And in fact, in the AI sector, things haven't changed very much, which can reinforce the fact that various companies have various stances on whether generative AI is something that they expect their employees to use or not use. Further, age and higher socioeconomic status, not to mention political ideology, influences sentiment and trust with regards to the business use of generative AI. And in fact, many remain skeptical of the business use of AI, something we can reinforce to our students. Some employers require fluency in generative AI, some will prohibit it. One of the most powerful things that we can do for our students is to help them develop a personal compass when it comes to generative AI. Consider leading metacognitive activities, reflections, discussions, etc., in which you can participate in a transparent way. Ask the tough questions. Am I qualified to judge the veracity of this output? And what if I'm asked to recreate output offline without the benefit of generative AI? What then? All of these will help prepare students for the real world. And remember, inside the classroom and outside the classroom, if we don't want generative AI to replace us, then we shouldn't prompt it to do our jobs. I encourage you to develop your own personal and professional philosophy when it comes to these technologies. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. If you'd like to chat one-on-one, just book an appointment with the QR code.